representation today. Awesome. Great job, Michael. You got the recording going. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to our Texas Supportive Housing Institute informational session. Would love to get to know you all a little better, so please introduce yourself in the chat. Hi, Marianne Chavez from Laredo, Texas. Welcome. We are joining today. We have both partners. My name is Brooke Page. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director for Texas, but I'm based actually in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I am the director for the Corporation for Supportive Housing. And I'm joined today with my co-host, with Michael. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, Michael Wiltz. I know many of y'all, but I'm excited to see a lot of new faces. I do external relations here at the Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation, and we're excited to have the Institute back again for 2024. I can go on to the next slide, Brooke, and talk a little bit about us. Hopefully, if you're on this webinar, you know about what we do at TSHAC. I'll keep this 60 seconds or less. Our three big programmatic areas are build, buy, stay. Most people know us because they've used us for down payment assistance to purchase a house. We've assisted more than 100,000 Texans since the inception of our homebuyer programs 20 years ago. The second most popular way people know us is typically developers use us to finance their developments, either multifamily or home ownership. And then lastly, the stay portion is our nonprofit engagement, broadly speaking. That includes our grant making programs, whether it's Texas Foundations Fund or disaster recovery or other grant programs we do, and also capacity building for nonprofits, and many of which are represented on this webinar. Housing counseling organizations, we provide training, and then we do the Supportive Housing Institute to help increase the capacity of nonprofits who are trying to develop housing, typically for first time.
Awesome. We wish we had more partners like TSHAC across the country. I represent the Corporation for Supportive Housing. We are a national nonprofit organization. We've been around since 1993, helping to advance, well, 1991, sorry, helping to advance supportive housing. We help with the intersection of affordable housing and wrapping those with supportive services. And we do that by helping with lending, providing a lot of early stage lending and supports for projects that need resources to get off the ground. We also provide technical assistance and training and support services, as well as we have a national training center that provides ongoing webinars and training and resources to our service providers, developers, property managers in the field. So we have about a $1.7 billion loan portfolio that we've helped create, over 467,000 homes for individuals and families. And so this is just kind of an overview of that work. A lot of our work in the policy space has really helped us ensure that the funding to sustain supportive housing it comes to fruition. And so we're really grateful for you all taking the time to be with us today. Thank you again for joining, and welcome to those that are coming online. Again, if you can take a moment and just introduce yourself in the chat. We see some new folks have come on. Today, we really want to give you an opportunity to understand a really important resource that TSHAC has afforded the state of Texas, which is one of CSH's premier programs, which is the Supportive Housing Institute. We're going to talk about the Texas Institute, the history of that, and why this has been really important, and why TSHAC has made sure that this has been an important resource available to projects that want to develop supportive housing. We're going to talk about the foundations of supportive housing. What is that? How does that differentiate maybe from other traditional types of housing? And then understand, how do you apply? What are the resources? Why would I want to apply for this important type of opportunity? What's in it for me? So we're going to get into those types of questions and answer your questions and talk about the timeline, the expectations of the process. So that's kind of what you can get out of today. We hope to get you in and out in an hour. And some things that you might hear from us today are just some common acronyms. One of which you might hear or see on a screen is TSHI, which stands for that Texas Supportive Housing Institute. You also will see the TSHAC acronym, the Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation. CSH, we are known as CSH, but our doing business name is the Corporation for Supportive Housing. We also, you'll see supportive housing or PSH used interchangeably, permanent supportive housing, but CSH, we kind of tailor supportive housing interchangeably, but supportive housing is synonymous to that. And then TA, technical assistance, and that's the support provided to projects to support, answering questions and getting that one-on-one hands-on support. And then PWLE or PLE, persons with lived experience. And those are the people that are closest to the issue of addressing homelessness or addressing the issues that are critical to the needs that we're solving for with supportive housing. And those are the experts that we believe are going to help solve our most complex issues in our community. So those are the people that we're hoping that we're also going to be incorporating in the projects that we're talking about today. All right, so those are some of the things that we are going to be talking about. And we also want to talk about the history of the Texas Supportive Housing Institute. So I'm going to pass it back over to you, Michael, to
Yeah, thanks
what is
so
this about?
much. Real quick, housekeeping items. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand. I'm monitoring both the chat and participants for any sort of questions that are raised. We're also recording this if you want to share it with colleagues or partner organizations that might be interested that weren't able to attend this. And we'll provide a copy on our website immediately afterwards once it's available. We launched our first institute in 2020. But the genesis of this is actually a couple years before that. It started with a relationship that we built with our Health and Human Services Commission. And we determined that in order to meet the health needs of some of the most vulnerable Texans, it would require more supportive housing to be produced in Texas. And so then I started looking at who was creating supportive housing across the state. And it was really just two entities, New Hope Housing in Houston and Foundation Communities in Austin, both of which were well situated to do that because they had done deal after deal after deal and were able to kind of bankroll each development once they finished the last one. So our hope was, well, how can we create the next generation of New Hopes and Foundation Communities? And then we got introduced to the Supportive Housing Institute, forged a partnership in early 2020, and we launched our first institute back then, not really knowing what we were doing. We were kind of operating blindly and learning things as we went. It was all virtual, of course, because that was 2020. Decided to do it again the following year because it was a success, and it was more successful in 21. Again, offered statewide. And then in 2022, we decided to align what we were doing with the city of Austin's efforts to create 2,100 supportive housing units over 3 years. So that's when we decided to do a place-based institute, and only invited teams from the greater Austin area. They had already had commitments from ARPA funds and other funding from the city and county. And so there was just a whole lot of synergy and alignment with what we were trying to accomplish and what the city and county were trying to accomplish. The photo that Brooke shared on the last slide is that kickoff session from 2 years ago with Mayor Adler at the time, and all the teams represented, as well as CSH and some of our other partners, our funding partners as well. And then we did 3 institutes, 2 statewide, 1 place-based, and took a break from the institute. And last year, we had the Supportive Housing Symposium in the fall of 2023 as a way to complement the institute, a way to build upon the networking that we had through the institute platform and expand on that, bring in other people who already had functioning knowledge of supportive housing and were experts in the field, and also on health side of things, and also service delivery and property management and all that. And now we're at a point where we think the best way to do this is in even years to have an institute and in odd years to have a symposium. So they're kind of going to complement each other in the foreseeable future. That said, it's been 3 years since we last did a statewide institute. And I think The demand for that is reflected by how many people are on this webinar. The last time we had this webinar, I think we may have had like 15 or 20 people. We had close to 70 registered today. There is a demonstrated sort of need for this type of training going forward, and so that's why we're excited to launch it once again and provide it to you all. If you want to advance the slide, Brooke, I think that captures everything, but there may be a couple more things that I wanted to add. Nope, that's it. Back to
All
you.
right. That's a really great overview. And what I love about what TSHAC is doing is providing this opportunity for the symposium to sort of spark that interest for folks that may want to learn more about what supportive housing is. We were able to do an academy at that symposium and provided some introductory information about supportive housing, which we will talk about right now as well, just to kind of spark an interest and kind of understand the differentiation between when a project is really ready for an institute. And I think that's an important question because that's really sets the stage, right? When should I be applying for this really premier opportunity? And so at the symposium, we held an academy and we talked about what supportive housing is. And so one, we know that we need a housing type for people who, but for the services, there's folks that are in our community that are not able to access housing because they don't have the resources to identify and find housing. They need help with navigating the community. They need help with navigating the resources. And once people are housed, they also need help with staying stably housed. And so this really important intervention of supportive housing provides those wraparound services in addition to providing a place where somebody can live that they can afford. There's folks that may not have income currently and may need a subsidy, or they may have not make enough because of the current rental market. And so that subsidy that can provide them with a resource makes that rental unit or that place for them to live affordable. And so the affordable place along with that service is what supportive housing is. And it's targeted for people who have complex needs. And so this is not for everybody. This is an intervention that is for folks who have complex needs that have maybe a high acuity, co-occurring conditions, disabling conditions, people with that need these wraparound services. And so it is an intervention that requires for folks that need this level of support. And so we have some key ingredients of supportive housing that makes it supportive housing. And these are the types of components that we're looking for when we look at the types of projects that we hope will be applying to the Institute. And so the key components of supportive housing is it engages folks again who have those multiple barriers or challenges. This is folks that are having challenges getting access to housing. Maybe it's because of their background. One of the calls in this application is for people with special populations, and one of those populations may be people with justice involvement. We know that there's housing types that keep people out because of their justice involvement. Maybe it's people with prior convictions, or co-occurring mental health, substance use disorders. Some of those things are barriers that keep people unhoused. And so, having supportive housing is intended to house people. And so engaging households with multiple barriers, supportive housing calls people in. Also, keeping housing affordable. Supportive housing is intended to ensure that people aren't paying more than 30% of their household income on housing. And so that affordability ensures that it's staying affordable. We also, in supportive housing, tenants have a lease. This is a really important component because we want to make sure that tenants have access to the tenant protections and that the landlord has protections as well with tenant landlord law. And so the lease provides those protections. And ideally, folks will be able to know that they can stay in a unit for at least 6 months or more, and that lease provides them with that protection. Also engaging tenants in voluntary services, services and the service provided in supportive housing is not voluntary for the service provider to engage with tenants, but when the tenant is ready to engage in those services, that's when those voluntary services is what we're speaking to, is allowing the tenant to engage in the services that are tenant centered, that speaks to their needs and addresses the things that they need to thrive. Coordinates among key partners. This is really the coordination, working with managed care, working with the larger community to support the needs of tenants, and then supporting, connecting with the community, ensuring that tenants have a voice in the community. If there's tenant leadership councils, tenant voice in the planning of the community, and supporting the voices of people with lived experience, and the connection of the larger community in the project. So these are the key components that we look for in quality supportive housing. And when we know that there's certain organizational capacity, effective processes, when these things are done right, we see strong outcomes in supportive housing. When there are a good flow of service funding, a flow of operating resources to sustain the project over time, these things align to the outcomes that we know work in supportive housing. Tenants stay housed. Tenants are satisfied with their services. Tenants increase their income. They increase their income, and they get access to employment. Tenants improve their physical and their mental health. They also improve their social and their community connections. And so all of these things we know work because for the past 30 years, this intervention has been evaluated and tested. It's an evidence-based intervention. And not only do we know that it improves tenant outcomes, but it also supports the community as well. There is a cost benefit and a community benefit to stabilizing people in a permanent place to live. The businesses that thrive because people are housed. We have a tax base of new taxpayers who are contributing to our community. We reduce visible homelessness. We improve safety and sanitation and increase our workforce when we house people in a home. So these are really important values. And this is important. And so why we want to do supportive housing institutes is we want to create more of these types of communities in our these types of housing opportunities in our community. And so CSH has been doing this work across the country for decades. This is a map of the various different institutes that we've been doing across the country. You'll notice in green kind of represents one institute that has happened in that state. Blue, there's been two to four institutes that have happened. And here in the state of Texas and other purple states, you see that there's been at least 5 or more institutes that have happened. And we've got one that's been planning in New Jersey right now, is currently in the planning phase. So this is a really great representation of how this momentum is growing across the country. And where you don't see color, it's because they haven't drank the Kool-Aid yet. We got to get them some color so they can start developing this really important intervention. And so why the Institute? And so we know we need this. There are people that need to be housed. We need affordable places for people to live with services. And so the Institute provides an opportunity to educate developers on how they can do this. And it provides them with an opportunity to get connected to service providers and mission-driven property managers who also want to be educated on how to create an environment that's tenant-centered, trauma-informed, and creates an environment for people to thrive in housing. It improves communities by ending long-term homelessness. It reduces the number of households who are experiencing long-term homelessness and cycling in and out of emergency systems. We've had studies that show that people who are stably housed are no longer cycling in and out of the jails, in and out of the emergency rooms. They're not, clogging up our emergency systems because they are stably housed. And we reduce the number of individuals who are becoming homeless or leaving state-operated facilities because we've got this important intervention and housing stock that's affordable with the services in our community. And so we know that this is an important intervention that we need to create in our community. And so we want to do this, and we need to do it. So we need to educate our community. And so we created this institute program to train on how to actually do it. And so we have an application that's open right now in Texas. It is the application process is open for developments that are interested in developing supportive housing, as we've talked about it. Teams must include a developer partner, that also a property management company or partner that wants to do mission-driven property management, a supportive service partner, and if you're in a phase where you're trying to identify who these partners are, we want to talk with you about those partnerships and ensure that we can help maybe connect you to people who are doing this work, and give you recommendations. But this is really important that these are partners that want to align to the mission of supportive housing. Eligible applicants also are developing supportive housing for people that are experiencing or at risk of homelessness in smaller markets or members of a special population. And so those are the priorities for this institute. All projects are encouraged to apply, but there is just a priority that's given. So we want to kind of hone in on the smaller markets. There's been emphasis in other institutes that are kind of been in the larger cities. We want to give some love to our smaller markets and ensure that they have an opportunity to get access to this training opportunity. And so we want to prioritize those applications as they come in. So if you're not part of a big city, this is your opportunity to apply and get priority. We also are looking for teams that may include partners who are new to supportive housing, as well as those that are experienced partners. If you're new, maybe you have traditionally developed affordable housing, and you're new to the supportive housing concept. This is an experience that we want you to come in. We want to train you on the difference between doing general affordable housing, or maybe you're doing traditional market rate housing. We want to educate on the difference and why supportive housing is a very niche type of housing type, and the things about trauma-informed design and service planning and the ways in which this intervention requires a different approach. And so that new exposure is something that we really want to encourage new applicants to this type of field to come and apply. And so, if you've applied in the past to the Institute, we definitely want to encourage you. If you've got a new project, you are welcome to apply again as well. So this is not something that we only want to exclude you. If you've done the Institute in the past, feel free to apply if you have a new project that you'd like to bring forward again. Maybe you have some new partners that you'd like to bring forward. So the project requirements. So housing is permanent. This is an important caveat because there's different types of housing that we need in our community. There's a different types of spectrum of housing. There's emergency shelter, there's transitional housing, rapid rehousing. All of these interventions are important, and we need various tools in our community. The focus of the Institute is on permanent housing solutions. And so the projects that we are looking for are permanent housing, and housing that's affordable. And so ideally, tenants aren't paying more than 30% of their income, and we're targeting households that are in that 0 to 30% of area median income, so on the lower, extremely low income spectrum. Also, tenants will hold a lease, and so we're hoping that your project focuses on the lease, and so we're not looking for projects that may just have maybe room agreements or group home type of settings. This is focused on actual tenancy. We are also honing in on the housing first model, and that is part of the supportive housing evidence-based intervention that we focus in on in supportive housing. And so the components of housing first allow for tenants to be housed, and once they are housed, we wrap them with services and get them access to the resources that they need without the conditions of them requiring them to be sober, or requiring them to meet certain conditions and be housing ready in order to get into a home. And so getting them access to a home is not a precondition of sobriety or treatment. Services are not a condition of occupancy. And so one of this is really important, is the separation of the lease and the separation of services. The lease agreement does not have any requirement of mandating that somebody has to go to treatment, or mandating that somebody has to go and have some sort of requirements of sobriety. A traditional lease agreement does not have those requirements in it. And so the separation of services and their tenancy is something that we look for in supportive housing. And so keeping those things separate, the service provider works with the tenant to address their service needs separate and apart from their tenancy. And so those are the types of conditions that we're looking for in these projects as well. A comprehensive tenancy support service strategy. And so we are looking, and we will be training on what a service plan is, and how to develop a comprehensive service plan, how to fund a comprehensive service plan, and getting those services to the table. And so we are looking for projects that are wanting to bring those intensive services, especially if you're working with a population that requires more wraparound services. Maybe they have more co-occurring conditions, certain special populations that might have serious mental illness, or co-occurring mental health, substance use disorders. Those populations require a certain level of service provision. And so we want to set those projects up for success, and we'll be training on how to ensure that you get the right service model to the table. And so we want to see that there's a commitment to providing that level of service in your project. And then screening and selection plans. And then this is a really important one too, because we want to make sure that we've got property management who are looking to screen people in and not screen people out. And this is tenant selection plans that are as low barrier as possible, that are only putting in requirements that are at the bare minimum that are needed based on whatever the funder requirements are. But, if it's not needed to put in, very restrictive requirements to get access to the unit, things like, source of income requirements, or, criminal background check requirements, those things tend to be barriers to housing. And so as least restrictive of those requirements as possible is what we'll be training on, and is what we are looking for in the types of projects that we're looking for in the Institute. So I'll just pause to see if we have any questions in the chat. I see, what if we're interested as a provider, but don't really have a developer or a property manager lined up, and we're interested in being connected to them? So this is a really great question, Heather. Thank you for asking it. And so I think at this stage, if you are interested, you're a service provider and you want to develop supportive housing, and maybe you have access to land, or maybe you have some form of a project already in the pipeline, we want to help you identify, a developer property partner. And so if you could reach out to Michael and I, and we can brainstorm with you and strategize how we can get you connected to partners who in your area, or who may be suited to support you in your project design. Those are the things that we would love to work with you before the application is due, to see if there's opportunity for partnership. So great question.
But Heather, you don't have to have the developer partner on board by the time you apply. Our hope is that they would be on board at some point. But if you have a very compelling vision, a compelling project, if you have partners, like 2/3 of the partners together, and they're extremely capable, if y'all have been doing this for a long time, the services delivery or any component of supportive housing, those are all things we'll take into consideration. You don't have to have a fully formed team to apply, and we've accepted teams in the past. Of course, this was early on in the Institute, where the teams were incomplete. So still would want to encourage any team, even if it's not fully formed, to apply, and to let us know, if you identified that other partner, or if you haven't, and like Brooke said, we're here for the partnership building and for brokering introductions, and can hopefully connect you to that missing partner for anybody's team if it's not fully formed.
Thanks, Michael. And so let's talk some more about this, because this is a competitive process. So we do have some limited spots. And so this is, ideally we want you to put your best foot forward. And so having part of this piece, but we'll get there. So thanks for talking about that, Michael. So the next part is completing CSH's endorsement is also a part of this process. And CSH's endorsement, I think, is a really great opportunity for projects that are going through the Institute, because it provides an extra layer of just kind of continuous quality improvement support for you to articulate to funders if you're applying for low-income housing tax credits, if you're applying for resources and funding, to show that you've got a nationally recognized organization that is endorsing your project as far as meeting certain quality components. And so CSH will be certifying and reviewing your policies, your procedures. We'll be reviewing your documentation throughout the Institute in order to endorse it at the end that you meet the criteria, aligning your tenant selection plans, your supportive service plans, and the various different components of your project that meet our quality standards. And so this is a really important piece that I think is something that we don't talk a lot about, but is a really important feature of the Institute. And so it does provide that continuous quality improvement. A lot of times we may focus on reactionary quality improvement if we have an audit, but this provides us to be proactive in that way and ensure that we have our ducks in a row before we even open our doors. We know that we're meeting certain policy and procedure standards. And this is some things to just think about from a quality assurance externally. That tends to be externally driven. This quality improvement process is more internally driven. So you all are going to be working as a team throughout the Institute. You're going to be developing these processes together and supporting each other together. And so CSH will be working alongside you to provide you with feedback, helping you, provide you with best practices and strategies and examples of policies and resources that you can be leveraging. And so this process of kind of working on policies together, I think is an important feature that supports that quality improvement. Okay, so let's talk about the Institute schedule and some of the components, but I see, Michael, you have a question. Very much interested. We have 5 acres we are trying to develop, which is exciting. That's so great. We have full set of wraparound services, including men's health clinic, trauma center, 18-year history of providing social services, and I have 30 independent nonprofits in my building providing resources. Wow, that is just phenomenal. This sounds like the perfect opportunity for you to develop supportive housing. I really hope you apply, because between the land and just all the ingredients that you have, Michael, I think this is exactly the type of project we would love to see you do. All right, so let's talk about the Institute and the schedule. So the Institute content is, oh, awesome. You were with Steven Adler. Great. So we have learning objectives. There's going to be some very specific components that you're going to be brought through the Institute, and we've broken it up into 4 different parts of the Institute. This is going to be taking place over a 4-month period. And there's going to be homework that you're going to be expected to do in between sessions. And we'd love for you to be working with your teams because you're developing a project. And so you would be doing this by yourself, but you're going to have access to technical assistance with CSH to be supporting you along the way. So you don't have to do this by yourself. You can reach out to a phone a friend if you've got questions, if you need support, getting questions related to financing or developing your policies. And so this is a really great opportunity to not do this in a silo, but to have homework and tools and examples and resources is one of the important features of an institute. And so we are taking a bit of a hybrid approach. And so what you can expect is we're going to kick this off in a live environment. We're going to be in person for 3 days. And so we're asking you to block your calendar for 3 days in October. We're going to be in Austin. And it's going to be really an opportunity for you to coalesce with your team, have some team building opportunities to be together, and do some, between team building, but also really to learn about your project, learn about each other, learn about us as a training team. And then at the end, we're going to culminate together for a finale event with the funders who are helping to fund the Institute. And hopefully we'll find funders who are also hopefully going to be funding your projects to be with us at the end to kick off, to finalize the ending with presenting your projects with a finale celebration. But in between those, the beginning and the end, we'll have 10 virtual sessions. And so we'll be virtually in November, December, and January over 6 days. We'll have various different sessions that we're going to be doing together. And this will be a mix of, we're going to do breakout groups. We'll have some didactic learning, through webinar, but a lot of interaction. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We'll have some featured guests that'll come and give their experience with supportive housing. You'll hear from experts in the field. You'll hear from people with lived experience, and we'll hear from each other. We want to hear from you. You all probably are doing this work also. And so the learning environment, we want this to be as collaborative as possible. Our TSHAC partners are also really important in this work. And so they will be featuring funders who are helping to support the projects as well. And then we want you all to commit to this process. And so the commitment is really important. You all coming engaged, ready to learn to these sessions. And so before you apply, and number one, ensuring that you can commit to the dates that we are going to share with you here shortly is important, but we want you also to ensure that your team can commit, because it's one thing for one person to say that they are on board, but if you really don't have the buy-in from the people that are going to be working in the project and doing the work, and there's only really one person that's committed, it's hard to see this through. And so we would love to see the engagement from the property management staff, the service provider, at least the lead, whoever may be leading that work, helping to maybe hire staff, the visionary, your leadership team, your fiscal team, the folks that are really helping to see the project through. We want them to be a part of this training experience so we can ensure that we have the buy-in at the beginning and we can see the project has the leadership support to instill these values in your project. And then the Institute, again, will culminate at the end with the finale. Staff will, CSH staff and TSHAC staff will be with you throughout all of these sessions, and we'll be providing technical assistance to help you on a one-on-one basis. We'll might be do office hours, but we will support you one-on-one to help you with your projects individually as well. All right, so I see we've got a comment in the chat. Can you share more information about existing housing programs converting to a supportive housing model and how that might work? We are a new development and we happen to meet all the criteria for supportive housing, but our owner group decided not to go that route when securing our TDHCA funds. We are the benefit of our organization converting to supportive housing model. Okay, so this is a really important question, Debbie. So it sounds like you currently are a new development and you want to be able to convert to a supportive housing model, but you weren't funded for supportive housing. And I'm wondering, is it because you aren't servicing a certain target population? Is it because of the funding? You want to come off mute and talk a little bit about
we
what
elected not to apply as a supported housing, so that was our election. We just happened to meet all the criteria of supported housing, but I think we, as an ownership group, we were concerned about committing to it at the time of application, and we elected not to do so. So I'm curious, like, what is the process of converting and what's the benefit of doing that? Like, we're already committed to providing it. So that's happening. And so we're stepping into that. We're opening in September. And what would be the benefit of us converting formally where we're endorsed, as you say?
Well, I think if you wanted to apply to this institute, especially if you're about to open your doors and you want to make sure that you have your staff trained in the fidelity of supportive housing, this would really be a great opportunity for you to, in the right timing as well, like to have your staff go through the institute, get the fidelity training around being, the components of the service planning and trauma informed property management and the mission driven property management components, and to ensure that your policies and procedures are in alignment, but then also ensuring that you have the sustainable funding to sustain your services and the service resources to sustain your project, and to service the target population that needs this intervention. And so I think those are the key ingredients that I would look to kind of evaluate and ensure that you've got at the ready. And then, if you would be willing, and then CSH can evaluate your policies and all of your tenant selection and endorse your project, that would be great as you're starting and launching your new project.
So I understand the benefit of the Institute and participating in that. I'm a nonprofit developer partner, and so I'm not as savvy as my other owner partners around the compliance and TDHCA and the definition of supported housing and all of that. So I'm curious, when a complex adopts and is endorsed as supported housing, what benefits, if any, do in terms of the owner itself? Like, are there funding sources that help with sustainability to pay for case managers and food delivery services and things like that?
Yes, there are fund sources targeted for supportive housing, and we go through that in the Institute. There are a plethora of resources. Some of them are more complex and braiding. In Texas, it's a bit of a dance, because Texas is not an expansion state, and so there's things that we talk about in the Institute around that. But there are resources that we go into depth about that, and we have a whole conversation about the various different service models and how to fund those services.
Okay, and I apologize. One more question. So if somebody like us went through the Institute and we were endorsed, you can then convert an existing project that's not a supported housing project, and you can convert to being that so that you could access these other sustainable resources?
Well, I think that would be a question for your funding. I would want to make sure that your
Okay,
funding, um, you know, isn't impacted first, and kind of evaluate what you're currently obligated to do based on how you're funded.
correct. Okay,
And then
that's,
from there, evaluate what you're currently obligated and how that would be impacted.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
But
no
thank you.
like official designation, Debbie, as this is supportive housing and this isn't. Like if you're doing everything already that mirrors what a supportive housing community provides, then you may find yourself not needing to change much or adjust much at all. But we really have to get into kind of the granular details of what you're committed to with your current funding and all that.
Yeah, I think the what we're lacking is the sustainable funding for the actual services. I mean, we're leveraging all of our nonprofit services. And I do recall, I think that our owner investors, through the TDHC tax credit process, wanted to reduce any complexity. Potentially that might have been another reason why we didn't choose to adopt that supported housing, even though we knew we were actually stepping into all of that.
Okay. Yeah, this is probably worth a separate conversation just so that we don't
Yeah.
get too bogged down in it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure,
Yeah,
thank you.
great questions. Thanks, Debbie. Okay, so let's go just through this. We've got about 15 minutes or so, and we've got this schedule that's a part of the application. You'll find this. We've got a really robust brochure. So this is straight out of the brochure. These are dates that you would want to block right now if you're planning on applying, just to make sure that you can commit. Part one is the introduction to supportive housing. We show you the topics that we're going to cover. And these are the in-person days that will be in Austin on October 9th, 10th, and 11th. And they are full days. So 8:30 is our check-in time, and we're going to go until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so for all 3 days, we want you to be present in person. And we are talking, and our TSAC team is really, depending upon where you live, working on identifying resources if folks will need support with travel. If that's a barrier, we don't want that to be a barrier. So we want you to kind of bring those questions forward if you want to support and participate. But those will be in Austin. Part two, we're doing tenant-centered design around supportive housing. And so we're going to be talking about how to ensure that your project is designed with your population in mind. And so the sustainable building design, the future care and support that's needed for sustainability and that preservation of the development of supportive housing. This section of part two is all virtual. And so this part one is in the morning on November 7th. And then we take a lunch break. And then we come back for session 5 in the afternoon on November 7th. And so from 1 to 4:30, we'll talk about service strategies, and that whole service conversation we were just having with Debbie. We'll get into all of those details around service planning. How do you plan for your services and deliver quality services on the 7th? And then we come back on November 14th, same model. In the morning, we'll do service budgets. We have a very sophisticated budgeting tool that you can literally plug and play and develop a budget around how much it will cost to develop and manage your service team, and the local sources that are available to fund that team. And we'll talk about the endorsement process and various different staffing models. And in the afternoon, we'll continue the budgeting conversation, but then we'll also talk about operating budgets and the importance of operating the project and those operating reserves and rent and collecting rent and the operating and sources for operations. And then part 3 is capital financing, property management, and services. And so this is sessions 8, 9, and 10 are in December 5th. Again, morning, we'll talk about capital budgets, asset management, and development. The afternoon, we'll do mission-driven property management, coordination, and fair housing. And then on the 6th, we'll only have a morning session on the 6th. So these days are back to back. But we'll do the first year of operations and what you can expect when you actually open your doors, and that first year of supportive housing, the move-in process, coordination, working maybe with your coordinated entry and the continuum of care in your community if you're referring and getting access to referrals from coordinated entry, and prioritizing people from the coordinated entry process. And then part 4, the final part of the Institute, is the development planning and the final celebration. And so this is done in January. The finale is in February. So January morning is the supportive housing retention, and how to retain supportive housing and engaging and focusing on thriving and outcomes and supporting people with thriving. And then session 12 is going to sort of be a review session, and hone in on topics that we really want to hone in on, that might be topics that we really might be some pressure points or things we really want to refresh on. And then session 13 is the presentation preparation. We're going to go over the quality endorsement application process in order for us to end and do our finality on February 27th. Again, that'll be the final in-person, and the location is to be determined. It's going to be probably based on our applicant pool, but that will be our finale. So we've got a pretty robust schedule. but we've got the dates, so we want to make sure you can commit to that. So I'll pass it over to you, Michael, if you want to get us on what to expect with the Institute.
Yeah, I'm going to try to limit this to 3 minutes in the interest of time.
Okay.
These next several slides. The most obvious benefit, well, there are several obvious benefits from the Institute. The first is the technical assistance that Brooke already mentioned. This will be available to you not only during the entirety of the Institute, but all the way until August of 2025. And you can use those hours whenever you want. If you've got pain points in your development process or something you're trying to work through with some component of it, then these will always be available to you. And we're still trying to determine exactly how many hours those there will be. The Institute is free for every session, in-person sessions, virtual, whatever. There is no cost to apply, and there is no cost to attend. If you're traveling to Austin or traveling for the kickoff or wherever the finale will be, if you're traveling for that, we're trying to figure out a way to cover travel costs. Now, that might require us to provide some grant dollars up front, or if you're able to cover the travel cost, you could just reimburse yourself, because we typically provide the grant funding, the $10,000 to $12,000 at the very end. And that's very liberal in how you can use it. It just has to generally support supportive housing. And so our thinking was, well, if you want to use some of that funding to cover all the travel costs, then that's acceptable. We're just trying to figure out the way to do that would make the most sense. And then the quality endorsement review, I feel like, is the other main perk from this. The fact that the development that you're making will have the stamp of approval from CSH, and that it's the highest and best quality supportive housing that you can develop. Next slide. Keys to a successful team. The more mission driven you are, and the more mission driven that the participants are, the more you're going to get out of this. The more that you avail yourself to all the benefits of the Institute, the more you're going to get out of this. The more that you collaborate, not only with your team, but with other teams that are there, the more you're going to get out of this with the peer-to-peer learning. Next slide. You'll need this is a CSH requirement that there's a letter that the top executive in your organization will have to sign, just committing yourself to the Institute and to the time commitment and anything else like that. We need buy-in from the highest levels of your organization. Next slide. Okay, a couple things I wanted to mention on this. We can select up to 6 teams, and historically we've been able to fill all the teams for our Institute, and we've been able to accommodate pretty much every applicant that's applied in the past. I think we'll have more teams apply this year. Like Brooke mentioned, we do have priority areas. Those are for smaller markets, not major metro areas, but suburban or small markets. I see a lot of them represented on this webinar, which gets me very excited. And then also anybody with a special population that you're trying to serve, single parents, youth transitioning out of foster care. We leave these priority applicants like very, very loosely, not even defined. We kind of leave it up to you to make the case that you're in a smaller market, or we leave it up to you to just say this is the population we're serving. If you don't meet either one of these priorities, you can still apply, and I would encourage you to apply. We just try to think of different priorities year over year, and this is what we landed on for this year. And there's some reasoning behind that, but I would encourage you to apply, because my guess is that everybody here is serving a special population at the end of the day. And then, like we mentioned, team doesn't have to be fully formed. We'll help you try to fill out your team if you need some help with that. And then, yeah, that was all I was going to mention on that slide. I think I covered it all. Yeah, move on.
I'm on mute. Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. So we've got information, and we're going to make sure that we've got the application link in the chat, but we want you to apply. this is your opportunity. If you're interested, if anything we said today sparks your interest, we've got some really great folks that have got great land, and this is, you're mission driven. This is for you. Applications are due Friday, August 16th. So don't wait till Friday, August 16th to submit, though. There's no extensions granted. And applicants will be notified whether they've been accepted by Monday, August 26th. The Institute will begin again on October 9th. So you have those dates. If you can commit, we want to encourage you to apply. And again, we've got those 5 team members. We went over all these things. We want all team members to be present. And so the last piece of this, we just want you to know we've got Brilliant Assessment is the application portal. It's a really easy portal to use. And the link, once you click on the link and you actually click on applicant, you'll put your name, your email address, and you'll get an email. A unique email will be sent to you, and it'll have a link that you can access anytime you want to go back into your application. It'll save it for you, and you can go back every day and do maybe a new section of the application. So you don't have to keep it open or feel like you're going to lose all of your information. You have your unique link that will save all of your information. And so we've got various different sections in here, from your team, the site location that you're developing your project. So we hope you have a site identified, and the population that you're looking for. These questions here, we're not looking for a book, but we do want you to provide a good overview to these questions about your organizational mission, the goals that you're trying to achieve with your project. Give us the experience that you have, the partners that you're collaborating with, and the folks that you're engaging with lived experience, to get their feedback and why it is that you're focusing on this particular population. What's the need in your community? Why is this the project that you're focusing on? Is there a particular issue that you're trying to address in your community? We hope that this is tied to a particular issue. So that's our presentation. We are right at time. My goodness, we made it close. Thank you for asking questions in the chat. This is our email address. If you have questions after today, this webinar was recorded. We'll make sure that gets out to those that weren't able to join us today. But thank you all so very much. And Michael, if you have anything else you want to add, but we appreciate it.
I'll stay on for about 3 to 4 minutes if people have questions.
All right.
Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Michael. Great group. Thanks for all the great questions.
This is Michael Lofton. How are you all?
Good, Michael.
Yep. I definitely plan to give you a call personally. I won't take up a lot of time. So I'll send an email